Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's session of Tales of the Bhagavata Purana, or Srimad Bhagavatam. And previously we've spoken about... Welcome to this week's session of Tales of the Bhagavata Purana, or Srimad Bhagavatam.
You have to close YouTube page.
Okay. Previously, we've spoken about welcome to this week's session of Tales. There we go. Thank you. All right. Last week we spoke about Dhruva Maharaj, and previous to that, we spoke about Narad Muni. So this week, another very important personality in the spectrum of transcendental personalities from the Bhagavata Purana will be speaking a little bit about Lord Brahma and trying to get some clarity of perspective in regards to who Brahma is and what is his position in relationship to our bhakti yoga process, etc. But first, let me begin as I normally do, chanting these mantras, which are mantras in praise or in gratification to teacher or teachers, those who illuminate our path of the torchlight of knowledge. The first two mantras will be to the general principle of that. Second two will be to my teacher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and then to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who delivered in this particular day and age, the process by which we could obtain self-realization, the Yuga Dharma, which is the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, and then we'll close out with the Hare Krishna mantra itself. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshuru Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantigam Namo Vishnu Padaya Vishnu Prestaya Bhutale Sri Mate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastatya Desho Tarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So in part, this evening's discussion will be some reading and some sharing of realizations and telling of stories, so we can get a sense of Lord Brahma. So, Brahma is considered the creator of the universe, but not a primary creator. According to the Vedas, and particularly the Bhagavata Purana, the Srimad Bhagavatam, Brahma is considered what they call a secondary creator. So much like the Abrahamic religions, where there is one God, and every being is subordinate and subservient to the one God, similarly, in the Bhagavata Purana, that point is also made. So although Brahma holds a highly esteemed position as creator, that adjective, secondary creator, is emphasized, meaning he more serves as an engineer. The substance which everything is made of, it's called Prakriti, or the material energy.
How you doing, sir?
In the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, in the
Okay.
seventh
Thank
chapter.
you.
Gotta mute. Bindu, if you can mute yourself, please.
I thought I was.
You're not. So as it is spoken that there is the Prakriti, or the material energy, and in the 7th chapter, Krishna describes that this is one of my energies, external energy, and Prakriti really means the substance which this material world is made of. And Krishna delineates in that 7th chapter, he says, earth, water, fire, air, ether. These are the 5 gross elements which comprise Prakriti. And then there's 3 subtle elements, mind, intelligence, and ego. These 8 elements are what we call the Prakriti, or the material energy. And this, what we see, all the shapes and forms and variations within our purview in this material world, are the result of the involvement of the personality Brahma in creating form out of this substance, material energy. The material energy itself comes from Krishna. Krishna says, this is my external energy. This is my material energy. This is my separated energy. And this is the substance, these 8 elements, by which this material world is given shape, given form. So, as is different from the perspective of like Abrahamic religions, where God is the creator, when he spoke the word and everything shall come forth. As far as the Bhagavata Purana is concerned, Srimad Bhagavatam is concerned, God does nothing but love and play. He has Leela, which is translated as play, and he exchanges love with his devotee. That is his primary function. So when then there are secondary functions to be performed, like the creation of the material universe, and then all of the various forms within the universe. There are 8,400,000 different species, so the creation of each of these species and the creation of things like mountains and clouds and all of this creation is caused by the secondary creator, Lord Brahma. That is his service. I was having a nice discussion with a friend of mine. We've become close friends, and he is a Christian, a very deeply committed Christian, and we were having some discussion, and it was a very wonderful discussion, exchanging, our understanding of relationship with God, loving relationship. And the one point I was making to him is that the difference being in Abrahamic religion, such as Christianity or Islam or Judaism, there is one God, and God creates, God does everything. He's the source of everything. Whereas in terms of the Bhagavata Purana, the Srimad Bhagavatam, that Krishna can empower, God can empower other living entities to do things of utmost importance. Or God himself can expand himself. If you've heard the word avatar, avatar means one who descends. And there's different types of avatars, different types of expansions that occur in order to have things function. So the function of the material world is less the purpose of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and more the function of the various avatars. For instance, Mahavishnu, he creates the universes, and Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, he enters into each universe, and from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, the expansion of God within each universe, comes Lord Brahma. And this Lord Brahma, as I said, is given the specific function of doing the secondary creation. So that is Brahma's primary position. Brahma is a living being. He's not God, but he's a living being who has the most important function in the universe. When it comes to creation, there is Brahma. When it comes to destruction of the universe, when the universe is wound up and destroyed and then recreated, the destruction facet or the destructive potency of God is called Shiva. And Shiva, that is his function and one of his functions and services to the Supreme. So you often hear within the Hindu paradigm, the Trimurti, that there is Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva. The misconception is that they're all equal. There's these three deities, and that's why sometimes, quite often, in Hinduism, God is perceived as it's a polytheistic perspective. Wherein, according to the Bhagavata Purana, what we're reading, there is one Supreme. Even Lord Brahma sings that in Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship that primeval Lord. Ishwara Padma Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha Adir Govinda Sarva Karakaranam. So Ishwara Padma Krishna means the Supreme God, the Supreme Lord. That is Krishna. Sachit Ananda Vigraha. That means he is eternity, knowledge, and bliss. That is what he is comprised of, as is the soul. Just like you have an ocean, and an ocean is a vast body of water, and it has various elements. It has sodium, different elements that are there. But if you take one drop of that ocean, it has the same elements. What is the difference? One is finite and one is vast. So that is the explanation of the difference between God and the soul. That God and the soul are made of the same substance, Sat Chit Ananda, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. But one is finite, the soul is finite, very small, very infinitesimal, and the supreme is infinite in terms of its quantitative potency. Qualitatively, they're the same. If you get this principle, if you understand this principle, it goes a long, long way in explaining God and God's position, from the paradigm of the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Bhagavata Purana. This principle of finiteness and infiniteness, and how the soul can be spiritual. Quite often you've heard people say, "Oh, the soul is spiritual," but then you ask them, what does that mean? And then you ask them, what is the soul's relationship with God? And you'll get varying answers depending on where the person is coming from. But from the perspective of the Bhagavatam, what we're studying this evening, and in relationship to the story of Brahma, the soul is finite, the supreme is infinite. And Brahma is one of the topmost finite entities, souls, who's given the power, the ability, because of his exalted position, to engineer the universe. So Brahma, as I said before, he is manifest from one of the functional avatars or incarnations of God for the purpose of creation. I'm sure you've heard different stories about creation, and the story of creation from the perspective of the Bhagavata Purana or the Srimad Bhagavatam is quite detailed, and nothing like anything you've probably read in other scriptures such as the Bible or the Torah or the Quran. It's quite detailed and it's quite specific, and it gives us a really good step-by-step analysis. And I'm going to give you a little bit of it. Forgive me if it's a little confusing, but I'll try to be as clear as possible. When there needs to be creation of this material universe, and the purpose of creation of the material universe is because the soul has independence and the soul has choice. And what are the two choices? Either to live eternally with God or to deny that relationship and try to live separate from the soul's relationship with God and try to establish itself as an independent enjoyer from God, separate from God. So when the soul makes, and I'm simplifying this of course, but when the soul makes the choice to either stay with God in the spiritual realm, the realm of eternality, the realm of constant, eternal, ever-increasing bliss, and the realm of full cognizance of one's position in relationship to God. So when one makes the choice to stay there, then that is eternal bliss, eternal knowledge, eternality. But if one chooses to be separated from God, then that is the purpose of the material world and material energy. Just like you have society, and then you have the prison system. So if you live in accordance with the laws of society, right? You have a great deal of freedom. A lot of people come to the United States from abroad, and they really relish the amount of freedom that we have as citizens of the United States of America. So you live according to the laws of the United States of America, and you enjoy great freedom. You have the freedom, to work where you want, to marry who you want, to practice the religion that you want or not. You have like all of these incredible amounts of choices that you can make. However, if you break the law, then what happens? Then you are subject to punishment. You're subject to following what the law says when you don't abide by the law, and that is punishment. And depending on the degree of infraction of laws of society determines the degree that you'll experience punishment. So the soul who chooses not to be with God, not in service to God, not in a relationship with God, then can't exist in the spiritual world, because that is the full-blown nature of the spiritual realm, where everyone is engaged in loving service to God in one of different ways. One can serve God as a friend. One can serve God in a parental way. One can serve God as a lover. One can serve God as a servant. So there's different ways that we can actually serve God. But that is the rule of law in the spiritual realm. And when we decide not to abide by it, then we need a place to go, because we can't exist there. And thus we have the creation of the material universe. And this material universe, the very word material or prakriti, means there's an energy that is temporary. There's an energy that is constantly changing. And that energy, prakriti, is an energy given off by God for the creation of this universe. And just as the atmosphere of a prison, or the environment of a prison, is different than free society, so the atmosphere of the material world is different than we experience in prison. The atmosphere of the material world is different than what you experience in the spiritual world. As one is bound by restrictions in prison, of course you can't go out of the prison. In the evening you're locked in your cell. You only can eat at certain times. You can only have recreation at certain times, and then you're given certain responsibilities, etc. So it's a much more restrictive nature. So the material world also is restrictive for the soul. The soul, which has the capacity of unlimited freedom and the experience of unlimited, ever blissful love, is restricted by the influence or the connection with the material energy. So this, in effect, the material world, in effect, is a prison house. And what is the purpose? The purpose of prison is rehabilitation. So the purpose of the material world is that we come here for not an eternity, but an amount of time designated, of course, by karma, how we act and what reactions we get to our actions, etc. And that's the determining factor. And when we do that, when we act in a particular way, and we show signs of rehabilitation, then eventually there's freedom. We're constricted by the gunas, the modes of material nature, sattva gun, or goodness, passion, and ignorance. Those are things that control our tendencies to act and behave in different ways. So when we stay within the realm of the material energy, prakriti, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, and we're using those elements to project our desires into this world, then there are restrictions. It's a very restrictive environment. So Brahma, he is the engineer. In other words, that prakriti, that material energy, is the very substance that he uses to create all of these various species of life. You have water species, fowl, human species. All the different species that are there are created by the potency of Brahma, and that is done in service to Krishna as Krishna's representative here in this material world, to give shape and substance and purpose to the prakriti, the material energy, in relationship to the soul. So that is what Brahma does. So it's a very significant position. That's why he's considered the topmost living entity in this universe. But Brahma is not like ordinary people. His lifespan, and let me explain this a little bit just to give you some context. Every species of life lives within the environment of that species, both physical environment and psychological environment of that species. So what does that mean? A dog, for instance, if you have a big dog's lifespan usually is between 10 and 12 years, right? So let's say you have a big dog. Let's say you have a German Shepherd, and your German Shepherd lives to be 12 years old and passes away. So does that mean that dog only lived 12 years? Yes, on one hand. But to that dog, its psychological makeup, its perspective of the world, the dog has lived a full life. So what do we say? In the Vedas, they use the term 100. They say 100 years. So that means the 12 animal years, and I think you've probably heard the fact that one human year is like 7 dog years, something like that. So if the dog lives 12 or 13 years, do the math, the dogs live to be 90, close to 100. So the Vedas confirm that. They say every species lives 100 years in terms of its perception, how it's perceived, and its environment, the aging process, etc. So each species is equipped that way, with that kind of perspective. So each species lives a full life. If the fruit fly, for instance, has a lifespan of 72 hours, that is, from the vantage point of the fruit fly, that's a full life. Human lives to be anywhere from 80 to 100. From the vantage point of the human being, the perspective, that is a full life. If the dog lives 12 years, that's a full life. That's the dog's 100 years. So from Brahma's perspective, get this, his lifespan, because he's the topmost living entity in the universe, his lifespan, his one day in terms of solar years, one day is 4,032,000,000 solar years. That's his one day. And similarly, that's his night. So if you're good in math, that's something like 8,064,000,000 years comprised a full day and night of Brahma. From his perspective, it's his day. He sleeps in the night and he's active in the day. Now do the math. 365 days of that many solar years, and then so you multiply that, and then you multiply 100 years. Once you get the year figure, then And it's something like trillions, it's in the trillions of how many years he exists. But all that may be the case, he still has a beginning and an end. Brahma, his existence is not eternal as Brahma. He's eternal as soul, but not eternal as Brahma. So he lives the equivalent of his 100 years and the equivalent of trillions of years from the solar year perspective. So he's not an ordinary person, let's put it that way. And when this creation takes place, there's three Vishnus who are involved in creation. Mahavishnu, from the breath and the pores of Mahavishnu, all the universes come. There are innumerable universes which emanate from the pores and from the breathing of Mahavishnu. So, like a bubble, coming, like if you go underwater and you breathe out and bubbles, air bubbles come. So, like that, each universe is emanating within, because God is omnipresent. And you've heard that before. God is everywhere. And this is how his omnipresence is explained. That he's the creator of the universes. Then enters into... I'm going to silence this here. He enters into each universe as another Vishnu called Garbhodakshaya Vishnu. And from that Garbhodakshaya Vishnu is kind of the overseer of each universe. There's a different Garbhodakshaya Vishnu for each universe. And from him, from that Vishnu, who is the overseer of the universe, Mahavishnu creates the universes through his breathing and his pores. Garbhodakshaya Vishnu expansion and enters in. He's the overseer of the universe, and from him comes the lotus flower where Brahma sits. That is the asana, or the seating place of Brahma. So when that whole creation takes place, Brahma is there, he's seated on the lotus flower, and he wants to know what to do. He looks up, he looks around, he just sees only darkness. So he doesn't know what to do. He climbs down the petal, the stem of the lotus, and he looks around. Still he doesn't know what to do. So he gets back onto the asana of the lotus flower, and he sits. And he sits in meditation. Intuitively, he understands that he has to meditate. So he enters into a meditative state and he hears two syllables in Sanskrit. The 16th syllable and the 21st syllable, which is ta, pa. Those two together means austerity. So Brahma hears a celestial voice from below him, from the waters of the Garbhodak ocean, and he hears those two syllables, ta, pa. Intuitively he understands that he has to go into a deep state of meditation. So one of the things which is very interesting about Brahma is really the creator of yoga. Let me read you something here. This is from Dr. Edwin Bryant's book called Bhakti Yoga, Tales and Teachings from the Bhagavata Purana. Edwin F. Bryant is also a bhakti practitioner named Advaita, and he's a professor at Rutgers University, the author of Yoga Sutras, one of the most comprehensive Yoga Sutras books there is, and this particular book as well as others. So he wants to give us a little understanding of the uniqueness of Brahma. So he says here, Brahma is the creator of the universe, but a secondary creator, more like an engineer. He does not create the primordial matrix of Prakriti, which, as we know, is a Shakti or power of Krishna, but is designated to create the forms of the universe from this pre-existing stuff, referring to Prakriti, the 8 elements that I mentioned: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. He too, meaning Brahma too, is a mortal being with a finite lifespan. Known also as Hiranyagarbha, Brahma is of interest for a number of reasons, one of which is that he is considered the primeval founder of yoga, according to yoga tradition. He is the original yogi. In this, he is associated with first imparting the practices in the original teachings known as the Hiranyagarbha treatise, which is no longer extant but referred to in various other sacred texts. So Brahma, when he was told, or when he received this vibration, ta pa, and understood it to perform deep meditation, he actually performed yoga. He was the first yogi of the universe, and thus the teacher of yoga, the principles of yoga to the universe. And there was a treatise called I believe it's called the Hiranyagarbha Darshan, but it no longer exists. Only references are made to it in various other yoga teachings throughout history. So this is, you want to talk about the first yoga teacher? This was Lord Brahma. You want to talk about the first yoga manual? No, it wasn't the Yoga Sutras, but it was Brahma's Hiranyagarbha treatise. So this is another interesting dimension of Brahma. So the narrative here makes several important points. One important yogic message is that even Brahma, the most intelligent being in the universe, is utterly incapable of perceiving or even understanding Vishnu. Now, Krishna says that in the Bhagavad Gita. In the 11th chapter of the Gita, the next to the last verse in the Gita, I believe it's 54, Krishna tells Arjuna, "My dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly." This is darshan. The Sanskrit word of darshan means that you can stand before God, you can see God, and have that vision, direct contact or direct interaction. Sometimes people ask the question, I don't believe in God, I can't see God. But the answer to that question is you can't see God because your vision is not qualified to see God. Just like your vision is not qualified to see molecular structure, right? Are you looking at your computer screen and can you see the molecular structure of that computer screen? No. But can you qualify your vision? Yes, you can. You can get, a microscope, a high-powered microscope, and you can actually see molecular structure and beyond. So you can do it, although with the naked eye you can't, but you can do it if you qualify your vision. So what is being one of the purports, or one of the important points to note here, is that Brahma, by virtue of his meditation and practice of yoga, that wasn't the reason that he was able to eventually come to the point of having God vision, having the ability to see God, to stand before God, to converse with God. He qualified his vision through the purificatory process of the yoga that he practiced. And by doing so, by purifying his heart from any false ego, any misconceptions about the true nature of the self, then he was able to win the favor of the Lord. And that's basically what's being said in this verse in Gita. That you, with your intellectual prowess or even your yogic prowess, you don't have the vision to see my personage. You can't see me as I am. But I will reveal myself to you if you perform tapa, or perform the yoga that will qualify your vision. Then, because bhakti yoga, the yoga that we practice, is the yoga of grace, the yoga of mercy, then by Krishna's mercy, he reveals himself. He introduces himself. Just like in the case of Dhruva and in the case of Brahma, Krishna appeared before them and he introduces himself to Dhruva. Dhruva performed tapa. He performed austerity. He performed yoga. And after he became purified by the performance of the yogic process, then now he was a recipient of God's mercy through having his darshan, or being able to see him. So I remember Prabhupada saying once that the devotee does not do things to see God, but the devotee does things to be seen by God. And there's a nice little story about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who was the guru of my guru, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and he once went for darshan of Krishna, Radha and Krishna deities in the temple, and he went, and he did not have good eyesight. He wore glasses. So when he entered the temple room, he stayed in the back. He did not go to the front, and he took off his glasses and he bowed his head. And his disciples who were with him and were a little perplexed, and they said, Guru Dev, why don't you come up? You can have nice darshan, you could see the deities. And his response was, I did not come here to see the deities, I came here to be seen by them. So that's the humble attitude of servitude that the devotee has within their heart. That let me act in such a way, behave in such a way, that I am noticed, I am seen. My humble, sincere efforts to please God are noticed by him. And then he appears before me, as he did in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, as he did in the case of Lord Brahma. And on many other occasions, the same thing occurred to a person who qualifies themselves to be a recipient of that great mercy. So Brahma did this. Krishna becomes before him, and he shakes his hand and congratulates him, and Brahma is just overwhelmed by ecstasy, and he says some wonderful prayers of glorification of the Supreme, because at that time, and same thing with Dhruva, you can imagine having that darshan, having that vision, having that connection or contact with God. It's an overwhelming experience. In Dhruva Maharaj's case, because he was so young and inexperienced, he didn't know what to say. So the Lord blessed him. He placed his conch shell on Dhruva's head, and then Dhruva became inspired. The very English word inspire means God-given. It means coming from God. So Dhruva then was truly inspired because he was given the understanding, the vision to not only see God, but also to properly glorify him. And the same thing with Lord Brahma. So Lord Brahma, is a great recipient of the mercy of the Lord, and in this way, he was able to have direct vision or direct association with God. So then he glorifies him in many, many different ways. So one of the things, like I'm saying, is one of the points is the fact that we cannot, the subtext here, as everywhere else in this, is that such a vision can never be attained by one's own intellectual or even yogic prowess. It must be the product of grace or mercy in order to be able to see. So this was Brahma's great fortune. He was given the wisdom of the Vedas, and how that was given to him was Krishna through his flute song. He imparted to Brahma through the medium of his flute the Gayatri mantra, and from that all knowledge came, all the knowledge of the Vedas, etc. Brahma, the knowledge of how to perform his duty as secondary creator, and all the other responsibilities that he had, how to propagate, fill the universe with all kinds of species. Brahma had sons, and his sons were tasked with that responsibility also, and teaching the Vedas, because some of his sons rebelled. They didn't want to propagate, and they wanted to remain celibate, like the four Kumaras, who never aged beyond 5 years old because they didn't want to, have an adult body, so they didn't want to propagate. And Narad Muni did the same thing. He did not want to. He wanted to remain celibate. So even though Brahma, that was Brahma's desire, because that was his responsibility. Hey, sons, give me a hand here. We need to create here. But because Narad Muni didn't want to do that, he was punished. He was actually cursed by Brahma to take a very humble birth as the son of a widowed maidservant, and eventually through that maidservant, who was a great devotee, and she served sages during the Chaturmasya period, the period of time where sages don't travel but sit in one place and increase their hearing and chanting. Through that, Narad Muni became very purified and became again the son of Brahma, and the one who gives God consciousness to everyone. So Brahma has that responsibility, and he also plays a part when Krishna descends to this world, and he brings all of his associates from the spiritual world. He brings the spiritual abode itself. So when Krishna descends, then Brahma is a participant in some of the play, in some of the pastimes of Krishna. And one such play or pastime is called the Brahma Vimohan Leela. And that means this is where the forgetfulness Leela. And how it is that Krishna, when he appeared on this planet in the abode of Vrindavan, every day he would go with his friends and tend to the cows and calves and go out to the forests, and they would bring their lunch. Their mothers would pack their lunches, and they would bring their lunch, and together they would, joke and eat their lunch and play tricks on each other, etc., and have a wonderful time interacting with Krishna and Balaram. So one such time, Brahma, he sees Krishna, and he's heard that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he wants to test: is he really the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Does the Supreme Personality of Godhead joke like this and play with play catch with fruits, like the bale fruit? Is this really true? So he had some doubt about that, as did Indra. Indra had some doubt and tested Krishna. So Brahma had some doubt, and he tested Krishna. And the way he tested Krishna was he caused the cows and calves to stray from where they were eating lunch. So when the boys noticed that the cows and calves had strayed away from their immediate area, they got a little anxious, because that was their responsibility to the family, to tend to the cows and calves. So Krishna saw that they were having lunch, nice lunch, and Krishna said, no, you all just stay here. Now, Krishna, of course, being omniscient, he knew what was going down here, and he knew that Brahma needed to be taught a lesson because he was forgetting himself. And so Krishna said, no, you stay, all you boys, and you peacefully eat, and I'll get all the cows and calves, I'll bring them back. So Krishna goes out, he searches and finds all of the cows and calves and brings them back. In the meantime, Brahma, who wants to test Krishna, what he does is he kidnaps all the cowherd boys. And we're talking about thousands of cowherd boys. So Brahma, of course, he's a very powerful mystic, yogi, and he can do things like that. He takes all the cowherd boys and he locks them in a cave. And this happens because Brahma's, as I said, his time span is different than the solar years that we experience. So he locks them in the cave for a short period of time, but according to Earth time, it's a year. So Krishna returns from retrieving the cows and calves, sees that all the cowherd boys are gone. Because he's omniscient, he knows what happened, what transpired. Krishna's mystic potency, he recreates every single cowherd boy. Now, you can understand that this is a direct expansion of the Supreme Lord himself. So these are not ordinary cowherd boys. This is really Krishna appearing as these numerous cowherd boys. So for that whole year, their play goes on. They come from their homes to meet Krishna and the cows, and they all go to the pasturing grounds together, and they do everything that they're doing. But the real cowherd boys and calves, they are locked away. So who are the parents interacting with? They're actually interacting with Krishna. So everyone who's interacting with each individual cowherd boy is really interacting with Krishna themselves all the time. So the love that they experience for their child, it grows exponentially. It's just so much greater. And the residents of Vrindavan are experiencing such love for their child, much more, because each one of those cowherd boys was an expansion of Krishna. So they're interacting with Krishna on a regular basis and serving him. Parents are always serving their children. They're cooking their meals, they're washing their clothes, they're working to provide good education and a nice place to live and suitable transportation. So parents are doing so much out of love for their child. And the more they do, because it's been proven by research that an individual, a human being, derives more pleasure out of giving than receiving. They've done studies in Harvard and Yale and other universities, and came to that conclusion. The studies prove that people feel better about themselves and about others when they're actually giving. So serving the Supreme Lord, you just feel complete, because that is the constitutional nature of the soul. is to serve. So when you're in service in that way, you feel complete, purnam, santosh, fully content, ananda, blissful. You feel all of these range of experience and emotional experiences. So finally, Brahma, he comes back down. It's a year's time, solar year, and he sees that Krishna is sitting with the same cowherd boys, and they're eating lunch and they're playing games and they're doing. And Brahma becomes very bewildered at this time. The bewilderment, Brahma vimohan, the bewilderment of Brahma. He becomes very bewildered. How is it possible? And he goes back to the cave and he sees all the cowherd boys are there. So he really becomes bewildered. Finally, he releases all the cowherd boys. They reunite with Krishna. And Brahma, now, when he sees all the cowherd boys that are with Krishna, the expansions, then Krishna, to blow his mind even further, he changes each and every cowherd boy from a cowherd boy to the majestic form of Lord Vishnu. So Brahma sees this and he's like totally bewildered. And finally, he realizes the mistake that he made, and he apologizes humbly, begs for Krishna's forgiveness, and he says these the prayers of Lord Brahma, these wonderful prayers in glorification and recognition of Krishna's supreme majesty and his position, his omnipotent, omniscient position as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this way, Brahma is humbled. And, just as he's humbled in the beginning, when he doesn't know what to do, and the revelation by Krishna's mercy of what his service is and how to do his service. And that's a very humbling experience for Brahma. At that time also, he offers his prayers. So in this particular pastime, this particular Leela, Brahma is humbled again. So although he's a very wonderful, powerful personality who is giving so much responsibility and so much potency, still he's subservient to Krishna. And this particular pastime, this particular Leela, helps him to understand that. So sometimes they get caught up in their power and need to be shown a lesson in Krishna, because he's the ever well-wisher of all living entities. He gives us ways and means to be humbled, because in a humble state of mind, that is the proper psychological environment. Humility is the first and foremost, in order to be able to be inspired, enlivened, enthused, and empowered to take to the process that will help us reconnect our relationship of love with the Supreme. So I will stop here, and thank you so much, Sherry and Gokula and Sid and Jai Krishna, and those of you who've taken the time to be with me this evening. Greatly appreciate it. If anyone has a question or a comment, please feel free to, at this point, ask a question, and I will be happy to try to answer it. And if I can't answer it, my 9-year-old son will answer it. He's right here. So, does anyone have any question or comment? No pressure, only if you do. please let me know. If not, we'll promptly end the discussion this evening. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your association. And next week is the 22nd, and that is the celebration of Nrsimha Chaturdasi, the appearance of Lord Nrsimhadev. So we will not have the class next week. I'll also announce it on Facebook and Instagram. We will not have the class then, but we will have a program at our house. We'll be hosting. And then, shortly thereafter, on the 24th, we'll be off to London and visiting our friend, who is actually the author of the book that I was reading, Edwin F. Bryant, Advaita Prabhu, who currently, he stays part of the year at the Isle of Wight. So we're going to go visit London and go down to the Isle of Wight and visit him there. Then we'll fly to New York for my birthday. Hooray, happy birthday. On June 8th, we'll go to New York City and experience the Rath Yatra there. So we'll be in New York the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And then back home. So again, thank you very much, and I appreciate your time. And I'll see you in a couple of weeks rather than next week. I'll make the announcement. Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Have a